If you manage a team, you should be using Monday.com. It's a platform.
Happy evening, everyone. Hope you all are safe and doing well. Excellent Excel welcomes you all. We are back with a new Fresh Talk on this weekend. Thank you all for enrolling in this event. We welcome you all. I also welcome Mr. Alan Murray, who will be addressing us in the next few moments. Let me give a gist about Excellent Excel. Excellent Excel is a data analytics firm that solves high-impact business problems using data and technology. We provide end-to-end services in the field of data analytics and data visualization. Our core services include analytics, consulting, and training. Excel Excel presents the popular talk show EiEFreshTalk on its YouTube channel, where it hosts great leaders and subject matter experts in various fields from India and abroad to speak regularly on a variety of topics ranging from Excel to analytics and finance to financial modeling and many more. Few of our past events are by Mr. Chandu on 5 must-have charts in any finance person's toolbox, by Mr. Sumit Bansal on 7 Excel features pros use to be more efficient, by CA Vijay Agarwal on new formulas in MS Excel and its use cases. Our today's session is on Secret Lookup Function that deserve your love by Mr. Alan Murray. Mr. Alan Murray from UK is an Excel expert, Microsoft MVP, Microsoft trainer, and consultant. He has been training and consulting for the past 20 years for businesses around the world. Mr. Alan Murray is the founder of Computer Gaga and has been consulting and training companies and businesses for over 20 years. He is also an acclaimed Udemy trainer. We welcome you, sir. Before we begin, I request the participants to join me in welcoming today's speaker with a hi in the chat section. For any questions or comments, kindly use the comment section. We will later present the questions to the speaker. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Okay, hi everybody. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me to your meetup here so that I can talk about the lookup functions that don't receive the love that some others do. So the plan is really to go through some examples of these not so well-known lookup functions without mentioning VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, or the combination of index and match. So those 3 are probably your most well-known lookup functions, especially VLOOKUP, which obviously over the years is the 3rd most commonly used function in Excel, I believe. Index match, its closest competitor, and then the new XLOOKUP. It's meant to replace them both. I'm going to go for the whole session and hopefully not mention those really. There will be index match, just not together. Everybody talks about them together. I'm not going to be doing it that way. So I have this file, and for the first example, I'm actually going to do something maybe a little bit naughty because it's not a lookup function. So just to make sure we're all happy and we're on the same wavelength, in Excel, on your formulas tab, you have the function library and all the categories of functions. One of those categories is lookup and reference. And as mentioned, the most common function in there by streets and miles is VLOOKUP. It's not even a contest. If it was a popularity contest, there is a clear winner. But as you can see, this list is quite large. I'm using Microsoft 365, so your version of Excel may not have all of those because some of them are quite new, but that is the complete list now, which I've never counted it, but it looks about 25 functions maybe. And hopefully I'm going to cover maybe 10 by the end. We'll see how we do. And these first ones are not actually lookup functions. They're not actually in that list. But this first pretend scenario is that we have this sample data, date, product, location, sales figure. This data is formatted as a table. So I have this table design tab at the top, and this table is named sales. And I think all of the examples, or most of the examples I'm going through, will be working off data which is in a table, because it's much more beneficial to work off a table than your typical sheet range, using the column letters and the row numbers and the sheet names. It works, but using tables will give you that dynamic formulas that update in the future when rows are added and removed. And it will also give you meaningful, consistent references rather than column letters. And we'll see that in this first example, and then also as we go through. Hopefully a lot of you watching have experience with tables. You know, there may be some other stuff outside of the content depending on your background and experience. But first example, we want to look up the value for the product of chocolate and the location of London. So a multiple condition lookup. This is a common question. Indeed, I have a YouTube video doing it with VLOOKUP. It's a common question. How do I do a multi-column lookup? And there are multiple answers to that. But we are trying to return a number. So the easiest answer in this example is SUMIFS. It's not a lookup function, but it's the easiest way, if I've got this one record, to return that number with multiple conditions. SUMIFS can only return a number because it's summing. So there are limitations, but the benefit is it's ease really, without getting into arrays and stuff. So in cell H3, if I was to start a SUMIFS function in there, so I've got two conditions, product and location. The sum range will be the sales column because that's what I'm returning. And I'm clicking on the table column here. You have to be careful when you're using tables. It's so easy to hit the sheet column instead, which will work, but I don't want that. I don't want D. I want the sales table, sales column. Kind of duplicated the name there, but never mind. Comma brings me on to the criteria. So criteria range, let's go for product first, product column, comma, reference to cell with the product, F3, just picking up the speed a bit as we get going here. It's just about to go onto a different line here. Location column, and then the location, which is London. So just run a little bit out of screen there, but I've got two conditions. Product has to be chocolate or whatever is in F3, location, London, or whatever's in G3, and then return the sales figure. And running that will return 567, which you can see is in row 7 here. That is chocolate and London. But if I was to change London to Chicago, then we've got 201 for chocolate Chicago. Or if I was to change that to coffee, there's coffee Chicago. There we go, 806. So 2 columns, could have been a lot more than that, could have been 6 columns if you've got something that crazy. And because we're returning a number, nobody thinks about using functions like SUMIFS. Everyone's thinking about multi-column VLOOKUPs and index match or the new filter or something like this. say maybe there's an easier route that we're not thinking of. So that's SUMIFS, not really a lookup function, but using it for a lookup. Now, working on that idea, I want to do another similar scenario. We've only got one condition. Well, actually, there's two, but one condition we can see visually on screen here, which is donuts, the product. But we're now being asked, can we get the last sale of donuts? So I don't care about the location. I just want the most recent purchase of donuts. So now people start worrying about whether it's in the right order, because VLOOKUP looks from the top down, as does index match. And, we want the last entry. But how do we know the later date is the last entry? We don't really, because somebody else could go and sort the data. Now, there is a new function an Excel could sort that we could use, but not everybody's got that. So what I'm going to do here is keep with some ifs, but before I get to that, I'm going to bring in a function called maxifs, which I think came out in 2019. I think it's quite recent, so not everybody will necessarily have that as well. You can put a max inside an if array if not. But maxifs has been around a few years, and we want to use that to find the maximum date for donuts. There's our condition. So maxifs, the max range will be the column of dates using my table reference there. Comma looks very similar to SUMIFS. Once you know one of these guys, you kind of know the group. So the criteria range, it's the product column, comma, and the criteria is the product in cell F6, donuts. And just using that at the moment, that's not what we want. We want to know the last sale. At the moment, this is the last date, which is formatted as a number, so it looks ridiculous. But if I change that to a date, then we've got, what do we have? We have the 1st of July. So at the moment, that's just returning the last sale date of donuts, not the last sale, the sale amount, which is ultimately what we're after. We're pretending here. Now, I could create another column and return that sale. Maybe I want the date and the sale, but let's pretend we don't. I just want the sale. I don't want this helper column, although there's certainly nothing wrong with that. So I'm coming, well, first of all, let's change that format back to general. And then we'll come in here and we're going to wrap some ifs around it. So now we know the last sale date, imagining that's unique. And we're going to come in here with some ifs. So the sum range, same as before, will be the sales column. I want to return that number. Sales here could be a different number in your setup. Criteria range, well, let's deal with the date first. So criteria range will be the date column, comma, and then the criteria is the maxifs function. That is returning the latest date. So after maxifs, a comma brings me on, looking at this box here, if you can see that, to criteria range 2, back to product here. And then for F6, yeah, close bracket on that. And pressing enter returns 261. So it has to be donuts. And it's got a, which is that one there, 261. 1st of July is the latest date in this list for donuts. But once again, if I change that to crisps, we get 766. And which is this number here. So 29th of June is the most recent, like the latest order for crisps at 766. So there's a couple of examples there, not even really using lookup functions, of how we can retrieve a number in examples that are normally quite difficult. They're quite common questions, these multi-column lookups, or how do I get the last one, or the oldest one, or the smallest one? And not everybody thinks about using functions like sum ifs, count ifs, max ifs to help them do it. So we're moving on to proper lookup functions next. But I like those examples because you're thinking outside the box. It makes it easy to do multiple conditions, whereas functions like filter and sum product can be a little bit difficult for some people, that the logic is quite different, quite unique. It's not like with if. Also, we're able to select columns. And one of the biggest frustrations for people doing things like VLOOKUP is having to do that column number. Well, these functions let you select the column. Huge advantages. Biggest disadvantage, I can only return numbers, not text. So let's move on to the next sheet I've got. And the first real lookup function I want to demonstrate, which is choose. I don't know how many of you have used choose before. It kind of goes under the radar a little bit, but it is one of those lookup functions. Now, there's a few different examples you may come across choose for. I'm hoping to do a kind of couple here, but it's possibly best known for working with form controls. Because if I was just to bring choose up on the screen for a moment, for anybody who might be brand new to it, let me just zoom in for this one moment. So this is choose, and its job is to pick a value based on an index number. So it will accept an index number, like 1, 2, 3, however this index number is coming from something or someone, and then it will pick from a list. So the first one, the second one, the third one. And what's really great about the choose function is it can return values, but it can also return ranges. So column B or something like that. And that's great because we can use it to feed other functions like a sum ifs or a index or whatever. So that's a huge benefit for it, and I'm hoping to demonstrate that a little bit here. So I want to do form controls here. They're not hugely common form controls, partly because they're found on the developer tab, a tab that's not shown as standard. So a lot of your general Office users won't necessarily know it exists or want it. But this is where they have form controls now on this insert button. If you're not sure how to get the developer tab, just right mouse click anywhere on this big ribbon. You don't have to be on developer. It could be over here, right click, customize the ribbon, and you'll have the option to check the developer tab on the right hand side here. And it gives you access to VBA and all that good stuff. But all I want here is just a form control, whether it's a combo box or an option button or a checkbox. Now, for a quick example, I want to do an option button. I've got 3 locations here, Berlin, Paris, and New York. Real simple examples. These could easily be on different sheets, just for simplicity. I'm keeping it all on one sheet so we can see everything going on. So in reality, there could be different sheets and stuff. But I just want to bring back the sales values for whatever somebody chooses out of Berlin, Paris, or New York. And they're going to choose using a form control. Just trying to do my zooming. So from the developer tab, if I insert these form controls, and I'm going to bring in one of these option buttons. I could draw it the best I can, or I could just click to drop one in there. And with this one, let me put one in, and then I'll take a copy of it. I'm just clicking drag in whilst I hold down the control key to do that copy. Control key down, click and drag. Now, if I was doing this properly, I would align them perfectly and distribute them perfectly. I might even format them. I'm not going to worry about any of that. We're here for lookup functions. We don't really care too much what this looks like right now. I will rename them though. So that one can be Berlin. Just left that little circle in there. That was annoying. Well, that O, sorry, it's not circle. What's next? Paris. And then we've got New York. Here we go. Let me go and change this. That's going to annoy me. Strive for perfection, haven't you? So here we go. I think I'll make them a little bit closer. Not too bothered about being perfect, but I want to be a bit better than that. Okay, now at the moment, if I was to click in these, nothing's happening. I can see what I'm selecting, but nothing's happening. I'm going to right mouse click one of those, format control. And in this format control window, I want to select a cell. I'm going to click in cell A1. You can click any cell you want. You can hide it, all that good stuff. We're doing a real dashboard or report. I'm not going to worry about too much what it looks like here. I want to see the work, but that's in cell A1. So I can see at the moment now in A1, it says 3 because I have New York selected. If I select Berlin, 1, Paris, 2, New York, 3. So most of the form controls, whether it's an option button or a list box, return a number. And especially for Excel users, if they're less experienced, when they see a number like that, just like when people learn VLOOKUP for the first time, they think, oh, that's awkward. What am I going to do with a number? That's not very helpful. And then you realize that functions like index and sort and VLOOKUP and choose love a number. They're going to run off that number and use it. And then you realize the potential benefits. So in cell C6, I want the sales figure for whatever they chose. Currently New York. So we're going to bring in, let me zoom for this, the choose function. Equals choose. So it will straight away prompt for the index number. And I'm referencing A1. That is the index number. I need to fix that, make it absolute. So when I copy this formula down 4 cells, the product E, that remains. And then I'm literally going to choose the things that I want in this list. So if I pick the first sales figure for Berlin, that's the first one, comma, next up is Paris, comma, just going a little bit off screen here, but next up is New York. And I've only got 3, but you can maybe see here that it's asking, would you like a 4th one? Would you like a 5th one? Would you like a 6th one? And so on. So negatives of the choose function is that if you've got a lot of options, it's not that great. It takes a while to write. It's a bit awkward. Positives is that if you've only got a few to choose, it's quite easy to read. It's very small, like straight to the point, very easy to read and diagnose in the future. It also calculates quite fast. So if I close bracket on that and press enter, I get the value. Let me zoom out. And if I drag that down, I've got the values currently for New York, which I realize we can't see. Here they are, 915 to 1326. But if I choose Paris, there's the Paris numbers, Berlin, there's the Berlin numbers. And to repeat myself, A1 wouldn't be visible. I don't want to see that. These tables might not be visible in the ultimate end goal. Somebody's choosing things, calculations are reacting, and then we can build stuff off that. Now, I could happily create a chart from that. Just going off on a tangent for one moment before we go back to formulas, which is what we're here for. But just for visual purposes, if somebody chooses Paris, then you can see the chart is now reacting. And all we did really there was set up a little choose function. It was actually a very tiny formula. Yes, choose function. Every function's got its use. There's things that choose is better at than index match or XLOOKUP, and then there's stuff that they can do which choose would either not be able to, or it would be more awkward to, and you'll choose the easiest path or the faster path or whatever. Now that is with option buttons. Just to repeat myself, but to demonstrate it quickly, if I did go to the developer tab and just quickly bring in another form control, I'm going to bring in a list box just for a fast second demo. I'll right click and format control. Apologies, I'm going a bit quicker here. They asked me for an input range. I've actually got a little list over on the right hand side here for me to use for Berlin to Paris, and a cell link. Let me choose a different cell. Let's choose B1. So now I've got a list box example instead. Instead of a drop down list, I don't have to drop down. There's only 3. They're there straight away. And if I click on them, you can see the number in B1. So it's another form control. They also return an index number, and I could edit choose to use that number instead. It's the same technique really, just demonstrating a different control. And now we've got that being driven by a list box instead of option buttons. And that's possibly the most common reason people see this choose function is when people are using form controls to drive selections in dashboards and scorecards and this kind of work and financial models and stuff. It's probably the most common use. It is capable of other stuff. Now I'm just going to take a copy of that sheet actually at the bottom. I was going to delete some of this, but I think I've changed my mind, and it might be easy if I just copy that sheet tab, and I'll just call this choose 3 because I've actually got to choose 2 already. And on this one, I'm just going to completely clear house like nothing ever happened. Let's get rid of this stuff. How fast can you click on things? Not fast enough. Okay. So what I want to do now, so that was form controls. Yeah, they're all right. I mean, personally, I normally prefer either a data validation list or maybe a slicer or something like this over a form control. Not that there's anything wrong with them. So I just want to quickly do a demo of a data validation list instead. Now, data validation list is not going to bring back a number. The form controls brought back a number, 1, 2, 3. Data validation is not going to do that. If I just put a data validation list in cell E2 here, data validation, list, and I'll just use that little list I have on the right, Berlin to New York. And here we go, classic drop-down list. What's the first thing you do when you get a drop-down list? You change the color of the cell so that in a minute, I'm not looking for it. So there it is. I've got Paris in there. And what I want to do, I want to put the sales figures in like before. Now, I don't have a number. I want to use the choose function. They're going to ask for an index number. That is not a number. So we're going to bring in another lookup function. So let's bring in choose. Let's do a bit of zoom in. Just want to make sure you guys can all see this. And I don't really know the size of screen that you're working from right now. That will ask for the index number. I don't have one. So what we're going to do is bring in a lookup function called match. Don't know if any of you guys were thinking it. So in my slides at the start, I said I wasn't going to do an index match, and I'm not. I'm doing a choose match. I love the index function. You can probably see the sheet tabs mention it. I love the match function. I also love them together, but I want to, in this presentation, show other more secret stuff that you may or may not have seen before. Everybody puts them together, index match, index match. They're good in their own way as well. They're always spoken about together, and maybe that's unfair on each of them. So here's match helping choose out. Match, for those who might be new, will look for something and return its position. That's fantastic because I can get it to look for whatever somebody selected in E2, currently Paris. Let's fix that reference, comma, where am I looking? This little list that I prepared over in column N. So Berlin is the first one, Paris is the second one, New York is the third one. We've now got an index number. Comma 0 for exact match, and close match function off. Now we've got the index number. If I was to select the match function and press F9, the function key F9, that's what it's bringing back to, because Paris is the second table, the second one in the list. Let me Control Z to undo that. Just checking things as we go with F9. Now we select the values, which is this, isn't it? Select that first number, comma, second number, comma, third number. Picking up the speed a bit so we can see more examples. Close bracket for choose. Here we go. Now we've got the same result, a third way option, but oh dear, forgot to fix something. This. It's testing you guys. I hope you saw that. Let's copy that down again. Option buttons, we saw a list box. And now we've got a data validation list, which if I choose Berlin, I get Berlin. If I choose New York, I get New York, and you get the idea. Different interactive controls for a user, which when they make that selection, things happen. Simple example with just 5 numbers. You know, imagine slightly sexier, more elaborate things going on, if you will. But those more elaborate things can inhibit learning sometimes. I like nice small tables. We can see everything going on before we start going crazy. Excellent. They are some choose examples. Doing okay for time. So let's look at another choose example. Hope you guys like choose. Now, just to save a bit of time, I've got a couple of option buttons already, and you can see in cell A1, they're returning an index number. So there's no point going through all that again. So I've prepared it. We do want to produce a total. Well, I've called it total. That's probably the wrong word because one of the options is average. So let's just quickly change it to result because I'm a little bit upset with that now. So I want to return a result. At the moment, I've only got Berlin. So one location, one store, one region. And what I want is if somebody chooses sum, it brings back the total of those numbers. If they choose average, it brings back the average of those numbers. Guess what we're going to use? It's going to be choose. It rhymed. We're going to use a choose. Kind of rhymes, not perfect. Choose. Okay. Index number, same number. Well, not the same number, but same cell, same idea. I'm not going to copy it, but let me fix it anyway. Comma, so it asks us for the values. Now this time, let me zoom in a bit because I'm going to use the formula bar at the top. And I'm planning to expand this a little bit. So let me just drop that down. Apologies, I've zoomed in a bit early and now it looks horrific. So I've got more space. Because this is going to be a slightly bigger formula. And although you don't have to, I want to put them on separate lines so it's a little bit easier to read. So at the moment, I've selected the index number, whatever is in A1, currently number 2, which is the average. Now, value 1 is going to be to do a sum, value 2 to do an average. So let me hold down the Alt key and press Enter, Alt, Enter. To repeat, not necessary, could just write it on one line. I'm then going to do 5 spaces. Doesn't have to be 5, I just like 5. And I'm going to bring in my sum function. And I'm simply going to sum the numbers I have here, which is those 5, which is actually a table, just like majority of these examples. Berlin table, and it's called sales, the column. And I'll close bracket on that. Not really that big a function, really. Comma to bring on to value 2. And I'll Alt Enter, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that's actually 4, that's 5. Average, the same thing. Down I'll go. I could have typed this in, but my typing's terrible. And then I'll Alt Enter and I'll put a closed bracket. Oops, that's the wrong bracket actually. Let me go back one. close bracket for average, then Alt Enter, close bracket. Isn't it great that they changed the color of the brackets? They didn't. I probably wouldn't have noticed that until I got this error flashing at me. But it's all good fun. So we've got a sum function, got an average, trying to show different examples of this. Choose can return values like words and numbers, like we've just done. It can return ranges, which I haven't demonstrated, but take my word for it, to feed other functions. And now I can actually put other functions in there, like sum and average, or whatever else, VLOOKUPs and stuff. So that is the average. But if I choose sum, I get the sum, 5336. Average, get the average. If you wanted confirmation, I don't know if you trust me, I could select them and show it at the bottom. But there's the sum. Here's the average. It's always good to check your work. It's a bit of a Oz du Soleil thing saying that. Here we go. Then the numbers, and now I can see them being driven by a user selection. I could have had other calculations, you know, products and standard deviation and I don't know, where else, max and stuff, whatever. It's just an example of just the two, just giving, you know, why choose could be cool. We can actually get it to run different functions from a list. And it also showed how you can break up a formula a bit easier to read. Right, let me clear those out. I don't want to do the double click actually. I'm going to right click and unhide. Got some hidden columns. Okay, hope you're sticking in with me. Why has this suddenly got messy? That's why. Right, what I'm going to try and do now is expand on the last example. So we can put a sum and an average inside this choose function. Let's open it up. We want to do it again, but there's not one table. We're back to having 3: Berlin, Paris, New York. Once again, all of them are tables called Berlin, Paris, New York. I've got a drop-down list so they can choose Berlin, Paris, New York. So now what I need is I want to do the sum or the average, but I want to dynamically reference the correct table. Now, just to make sure we're all happy, we've seen it a few times, but let me just put it out there before this example, that if I was to select the column of a table, that is what it looks like. It's got the name of the table, Berlin, Paris, New York. And then it has the, I've just realized something, but then it has the name of the column, which is sales for all 3 of them. There's a consistency in the word sales. And that column is surrounded by square brackets. So what I want to do here is I want to open up this choose function. And the index number is going to be whether it's a sum or average. No change there. I'll fix it even though I don't need to. Comma. The issue is going to happen here. I want to do the sum and the average, but I need it to choose the right column. There's 3 columns. How's it going to know what to choose? Well, I'm going to bring in some help. Let's bring in the sum function to begin with. Let's do this in the formula bar. Let's do my breakdown like before. So it prompts me, okay, where are these numbers? Right, another lookup function. This one is indirect. So indirect, another lookup function. The brilliance of indirect is that it converts text to a reference. So I can't just reference the text in that cell, like Paris, and then use that as the name of the table, which it is. The table's called Paris. In the cell, it says Paris. It's the same thing, surely. No, that's content, that's text. The table is a living reference. And indirect will return the reference specified by text. Now, what I've got to do is build up that column reference we saw a moment ago. Name of the table, square bracket, the word sales, the column name, closing square bracket. Now, the name of the table is coming from that cell I2, the little drop-down list for Paris, Berlin, etc. Let's fix it. Yes, I'm now going to put in a ampersand to concatenate or to combine and open up the double quotes to start writing in some literal text. And I'm going to put in the square bracket, the word sales, that's the column name, the closing square bracket, close off the quotes. So I'm creating this dynamic column header from cell content and then written content, which if I put them together will say Paris sales, which is how the column references are done, which I demonstrated before we came in here. Close bracket indirect, close bracket sum. So that should be the table reference. I can put a column, so not a column, a comma, and I'm going to cheat by copying that because really the next one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is going to be the same, but it's going to be average. Average. And I'll put my close bracket. So the only difference to the previous example is that we have indirect in here. It's the first example of it so far in this presentation. It's a really useful function, and I'm using it to build up this table reference. We can also use it to build sheet references and named range references. Let's close our eyes and press enter, and hopefully that worked. 1265 for Paris on average. So the average of those numbers is 1265. But if I was to change this to Berlin, then we get Berlin. And something I realized coming in here is that New York doesn't work because I've actually, in the table name, not got a space in it. That's only I thought of that as I was coming in. And it's not going to let me include one. So going a little bit off topic here now, but I could use a function like substitute to delete that space and get it to work that way. This is something I just literally thought of just before I was about to write that. Works perfectly with Berlin and Paris. Yes, if I was going to get this working, feel free to ignore this. This is going further than what I actually planned now. But there's a function called substitute where I could ask it to replace space. Let me check this works with nothing. And let me check this is going to work. So I'm just replacing the space with nothing. So remove the space from that New York cell. Paste. Looks better in the formula bar than it does in that cell right now. And New York works. Woohoo. And that's what it looks like. So I didn't plan for that. But substitute a text function. It's like the find and replace of functions. So basically remove any spaces if there are a space. You can't use spaces in name ranges and tables. So I couldn't do it with New York. Obviously I could have took the space out of the drop-down list, but people are going to see that. They don't want to see New York as one word. That's not how it should be. So although it would work, we want to do this the right way, you know. And another choose function here, but also introduce an indirect, another lookup function. Right, this is good fun, isn't it? Indirect. Now this example we've kind of done, but just bringing some of my examples together. I've got a beautiful looking speech bubble there saying, I am not what I appear to be, because if I click on cell K2, where it says Q3 sales, but it doesn't. In that cell, it just says Q3. It doesn't say Q3 sales, it says Q3. The word sales I put in there through some custom formatting. So it's not really there. It looks like it's there. It's not there. There's a drop-down list of quarter 1, 2, 3, or 4. And going back to the very first example, I did some ifs. Got that again. Somebody wants to look up a multi-column lookup, multi-condition lookup. They want coffee, they want London, just like the first example, but with something a little bit extra. We now don't know what column we want to return from because it's going to be specified by the user. They're going to say, oh, okay, I want coffee, I want Toronto, and I want this quarter. So we've kind of got 3 conditions. 2 of them are columns and one of them's in a row. So it's a really awkward lookup. If you're going to do this with your common options, your VLOOKUPs and your index matches, where you'd need like 3 matches to do this. That's not bad. It's a very good, fast formula. But we're going to do it with some ifs, because once again, we are returning a number, and some ifs is probably the simplest way to get this done without doing tons of match functions and stuff. So in cell K3, maybe we'll use the formula bar. I think let's zoom back in, but use the formula bar. In cell K3, sum ifs. Okay, the sum range. Straight away, that's the difficult question. They're coming straight in with a difficult one because the sum range is it quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4? So they're calling it sum range. Just bear in mind, this is the return range. This is unique, by the way. There's only one sales number. Otherwise, we'd obviously add them otherwise. But there's only one, just like a normal lookup. There should only be one. Unique ID, all that jazz. Exact match, whatever you want to call it. Okay, we're going to use our friend indirect, just like before. We're putting together example 1 and the last example really here. And we're going to build up that column reference. Which reminds me, I've completely forgotten what this table is called. So let me just click on one of these table columns because it will write it in for me, which is helpful. And then I'll just delete it to there and I'll wrap that bit in quotes. So that bit I know, that's the table name, open square bracket. What I now don't know is the name of the column because that is specified by this cell K2. Whoops. Oh, I haven't got an ampersand in there. Ding, ding, ding. Ampersand. Shoot back over K2. Remember that word sales is not there. That says quarter 3. And then another ampersand so I can wrap that close in square bracket. So it's not exactly the same as the previous example. The previous one, I was using indirect for the table name. Now it's for a column name. So we're having to combine the table open square bracket with the name of the column with the closing square bracket. And that is going to be the sum range. The rest of this, we're home and dry, I think, if you're familiar with sum ifs. Comma, let's do this Alt-Enter stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Criteria range is the product, is that column. Comma, the criteria is coffee. It's just off screen as I zoom in, but the drop down list of the product. Comma, I could carry on or I could Alt-Enter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next up is the location. That comma, the cell that's got London written in, which you can't see at the moment. Alt-Enter, close bracket. We could do loads more. Examples, wrong shortcut. So there's your coffee and your London. There's my formula. 432 for coffee London. And there's quarter 3. 432. But as you know, if I change that to Toronto, which is coffee Toronto down here, 646. Or if I change this one to quarter 1, so now we've got, I've completely lost myself, coffee Toronto quarter 1, 152. So a two-way lookup So we've got 2 columns, but also we need to look at something along a row. So quite an intense lookup. And I don't know your thoughts on this. Not everybody has the same preferences or ideas, but I think using some ifs, and obviously by keeping consistent with names of stuff, I can use indirect. It's quite a small function. Indirect is a volatile function, if you're familiar with what those are. So they can affect calculation speed. If you've got big spreadsheets, there might be better ways maybe than using indirect. But unless you've got large stuff, it can really make your formulas a lot, I think, a lot more concise and maybe easier to change, really just affected by that cell there. But it's great there's different options, different options for us for different use cases. And some ifs again, not really a lookup function. Okay, I could probably squeeze in these last 2 examples if you're enjoying this. So this time we're going to see index, but I want to show indirect one more time first. Now I'm using Microsoft 365. I've got the new dynamic array functions, and I've got filter and XLOOKUP and sort and all those good stuff. But you might have noticed so far in this presentation, I don't believe I've used any of them. So they're all amazing. I have not done any of them in here. Functions like choose and some ifs and indirect have been around for ages. I'm now going to use indirect again, but I am taking advantage of the dynamic array engine in this example. Then I'm going to use index where I won't need dynamic arrays. But let me just do a quick little dynamic array example. Last week, literally, was the last phase rollout of these dynamic arrays only to 365 users. So to be clear, indirect, everyone's got the way I'm going to demonstrate this right now, uses dynamic arrays. Sorry, I'm zooming in and I haven't really explained myself. So 5 tables, very similar to the previous ones with Berlin, blah, blah, blah. But now I've got Australian and New Zealand places. Perth, Sydney, Auckland, Melbourne, and Wellington. They're all tables, and you can probably guess what they're called. Perth, Sydney, blah, blah, blah. I've got a drop-down list up here of, the words. So the user is going to select it. And what I want, very similar to the first choose example, that first choose example, I created the chart from it and the form controls and the drop-down list. I want that again, and I want to return it here. I've got the headers. Product name, sales. I just want the name of the product and the numbers. And as you might notice, look, they're not all the same. That one's 5 rows. That one's 6 rows. So they're not exactly the same. Okay. Good news with these dynamic arrays is that they're dynamic. So in the older versions to do arrays, which was useful, but they were slow and awkward and other people didn't understand them, so they weren't as useful as they could have been. But you'd have to select the area, which is the worst thing about them. Briefly going over this because it's not really on our topic. But indirect is because it's a lookup function. And all I've got to do here, how easy is this? Each of those table names share what it's called in that dropdown, just like a New York, Berlin example. Indirect, that cell, close bracket. It's about as smaller formulas you're going to get, and there they are. Because all I'm literally saying is I'm just indirectly referencing whatever's in that cell, convert it to the name of the table, and it brings it back. And because I'm using a table, not a named range or a grid reference on a sheet, because I'm using a table, they know that the headers are not part of the table. But they are, but they're not content. So it's bringing back just the product A to the 429. Really cool. And notice, because they're dynamic, if I choose Sydney, the one with the 6 rows, I get a product F. And if I choose Melbourne, I get the product G, and so on. So they're actually dynamically resizing as well. So to repeat, that's taking advantage of dynamic arrays, which some of you I'm sure have, because it's out for 365 and a lot of people use the 365 version. But if you're using 2019, 2016, 2013, you're not going to have those yet. So amazing, definitely worth knowing, because a lot of you can benefit from how simple that formula is, and it's dynamic and amazing. But let's look at an example that we could all use. And this is bringing in possibly, big statement coming, possibly the best function in Excel. It's up there. It's got some competition, but it's up there. And that is index. Index is an incredible function. As I've mentioned once or twice, because it's frustrating sometimes, index always gets coined with match. They're always mentioned together. But I've already shown that match is useful outside of index. And even more so, index is incredible. It doesn't need match around to be useful. That's not to discredit them together. They're incredible together. But they're also two separate functions in their own right. And I'm going to use it here. Not using dynamic arrays. So look at this. It's actually got two ways of writing it. That's how good it is. The second one uses an area num, which I don't have an example for, but you could look up. Just using the classic first example. Now, index can return values, which is what I want, name of the product, sales number, but it can also return ranges, just like choose can. And that is really good because we can use it to feed indirect or sum ifs, or it opens up potential if we need that potential. Right, the array, what am I doing? I've completely forgotten what I'm doing. I need to reference that, I need indirect. Indirect, that cell, getting a bit click happy. Now I need to fix it this time because I'm going to copy the formula. I didn't need to copy it with the DAs. I need to copy it now. So that bit's the same as before. Indirect, you grab the right table, the whole table. But once you've got that table, comma, I now need to tell you what row number and what column number to return from. So, you know, that product A right here is the first row of the table. You know, and that sales is the first row, second column of the table. And I want a dynamic way of retrieving that for when I copy it. So this is my excuse for the presentation, to bring in more lookup functions that don't get mentioned. Row. There's a function called row. It's another lookup function. It does the really simple job, doesn't sound very useful, of returning a row number of a reference. Okay, what reference could I give it? I'm just going to give it A1. You can give it any reference you want, but the row number of A1 is 1, and that's what I want. I want the first one. Now, I'm not going to fix that because when I copy it to the right for sales, I need it to move over. More importantly for that one, when I move it down, it's got to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Column, who can guess what I'm going to do? There's a function called column, isn't there? And I'm going to give it A1 because the column number of A1 is 1. I know we can see A, but it's column 1. Those letters don't really exist. Close bracket for column, close bracket for index. So that is saying bring back whatever's in the first row, first column of Auckland, the table Auckland. When I press enter, it tells you product A. Here comes the cool thing. If I copy it down and across, it does it for the others. Now, obviously you're thinking about these, they've only got 5 products. I know that Melbourne has 7, so I should copy it down 2 more. Oh, that doesn't look nice because Auckland, where's Auckland? Here it is, only has 5 products. So you can see the difference and how much easier indirect was there, but it's no big deal. Obviously, as I copy this, these row and column numbers are changing. I'm just going to come in here and just throw in an if error function and say, look, if that lookup formula, I'm sure you all know index match and VLOOKUP return hash and A's and match. If that comes back with that #A error, or in this case a #ref error, then just show nothing really. And I'll just use classic if error to hide those errors. Just like, you know, for those who use lookup formulas, I'll be amazed if you haven't done that in the past because of, you know, VLOOKUP being the popular one, the way it returns #A when there's not necessarily something wrong. So now when I choose it to the likes of Melbourne, I'm getting those same results. And just like the first choose example, I could run charts off that and other formulas like sum ifs and this kind of stuff I might want from it. And that's index, quite, I think, a reasonably small formula again. It's no bigger than what an index match would look like. Yeah, index, brilliant function. Okay, I'll just hit the hour mark and do one more example if that's okay. I know a lot of this I'm going through at a reasonable speed. I'm explaining stuff, but I'm not explaining it to the detail that some proper training would happen. But part of the idea of these presentations, you know, is to show you what's possible, you know, to give you an insight to these functions so that if you're interested, you can go and research, you can go and find more information, you know, enroll in a course if you want, or just watch some YouTube videos, go and buy a book. And part of the battle is knowing it's possible, isn't it? And that the other options are there. And knowing what to look for is part of it. But this is by no means like a proper training course where you'll get to practice it, etc. Got along with me, lads. Okay, this last example, I'm just trying to finish with something with a little bit of a razzmatazz. That is my plan. So we have, I bet you're not surprised to hear this, a table. This table is called data. Formatted as a table, it's called data. It's got a period, about 2 years worth of periods. It's got a product, it's got a category, it's got some numbers, simply called value. You can pretend they are whatever you want to pretend they are. Somebody is going to enter how many periods they want to see. They're going to say, I would like to see 10 periods. I would like to see 6 periods. That's what they're going to do. They're also going to decide whether they want to see product or category in rows. Now I'm using the word rows because in my head, I'm thinking pivot table. Somebody wants to create a pivot table here. It's not actually going to be a pivot table. It's going to be formulas. But they want either the product or the category down here. They're going to choose and drop down product or category. Along here, they want the periods, whether it's 8, 6, 10 periods. So just like a pivot table, you've got your row labels, you've got your column labels, and then you've got your calculations in the middle, in the values area. It's called values? It's called values, isn't it? Whatever it's called if you're messing up. We're going to get this with formulas. Now, over on the right-hand side, a little bit of prep work has been done. I've got a unique list of the periods, the 2 years worth of periods, unique list of products, unique list of category. These are named ranges. That is named product. That is named category. This is actually a spill ref. It's a dynamic array thing. So apologies for anybody watching who may not have used a dynamic array before. I guess this is a nice insight for you, but it also might be a bit confusing because you might be seeing this for the first time or only the second or third time. These are named ranges, which you might be familiar with. Apologies, time is difficult to get too much into explaining all. Now I'm going to take advantage of the dynamic array engine here. So let's quickly get this, see if we can do this in 5 minutes. This first bit, we literally saw in the previous example. Using dynamic arrays for this final example, it can be done without them, but it's extremely awkward. Well, not extremely, but it's not right. But I'm going to put this indirect function, and I'm just going to reference whatever somebody selected in that list. Just like the previous example with Perth, Melbourne, etc. And that will spill just like that example did. And if they choose category, I get categories. And if they choose product, I get product. That cell is just a link to that cell. So that is the same as when I did indirect for that, but seeing it in a different scenario. So I'm trying to build up a dynamic pivot table, because pivot tables are incredible, but they can also be frustrating. There's certain limitations as to what you're allowed to change and do. And I want to create something that's just open for me to do whatever I want, really. Okay, the periods. This is probably the most difficult bit here. And one of the reasons I want to do this example is because I want to show index creating a dynamic range, because I need the last 8, or whatever they choose from here, periods. So remember, the periods are here, like for the original data, but in column W, I'll need that in a minute. So remember, it's W when I use it. I've got a unique list of the periods. So if somebody says, I want the last 4, it's that. I want the last 8, it's that. It needs to dynamically grab the last 8, whatever, from that spill range. So here we go. This is exciting. It's happening with index. Oh, index is so good. Let's do this in the formula bar if you find that easier. It's difficult when you're writing bigger formulas and I'm trying to zoom in. Do I use the bar or the cell? Let's use the formula bar, but it does mean we can't see a lot of other stuff, I'm afraid. Okay, the array is going to be column W. I'm using the sheet reference. It doesn't matter about case. I messed it up. It doesn't matter. Remember, column W is the column of periods. Comma. Okay, what is the row number? Okay, I want to find the first period. So remember, I want the last 8, whatever's chosen. So find the bottom, go back 7. That'll be the, that'll be the first one of the last 8, if I'm making sense. Here comes another lookup function, rows. So we saw row, it returns the row of a reference. Now we've got rows. It returns how many rows are in the reference. It's pretty cool. It's another lookup function that some people have never seen before. Because it hasn't got the potential of a next lookup. But it can be helpful like now. I'm going to get it to use, that's wrong, that spill ref. So I repeat, sorry for anybody who's brand new to dynamic arrays. Well, not that sorry, because you're seeing something really cool and useful to learn. But sorry in respect that it may be a bit difficult for the learning point of view. But if I come out and come across, you see it's colored red. So it's referencing that. The hash is the spill ref. It's saying from W1 all the way to the end, that reference. And I'm doing that. Now, what I'm trying to do is find how many rows are in those periods. Because how many would be the last one? So basically, I'm on the last row. I'm now going to go back, like take away the cell, which you guys can't see because I'm trying to zoom in, but that's got the 8 written in, the number of periods, +1. So I want to go back 7, really. Because when you get to here, so rows will grab the last one. It will then go back 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then +1. So that's actually the first of the last 8. Right, time's getting away. Let's pick up. Nearly done here. Yes. Next question is, what column do you want? It's optional. Square brackets mean it's optional. I don't need it. The column W is only one column. I haven't got to tell you what column. Close bracket. Here comes the cool thing. Colon. Colon is the range operator. So what I'm getting index to do is not return the value. I'm getting it to return the cell of that. Not the period, the cell that that period is in. And that's what's cool. Some functions can return values, some can return ranges. It's a little bit extra. As soon as I put that colon in, it knows it's a range. And now I'm going to get the other part of that range. So for example, W14 to W20 or whatever it's going to be. This, let's cheat. God, it's taking so long to copy. I could have typed it. W, number of rows, close of index. So from the one that's 7 back, or that's based on that cell reference, to the last one. That's what that is doing. Using dynamic arrays. So index, a function that's been around forever, rows been around forever, but I'm using the engine of dynamic arrays, so it will spill down the last 8, and if I choose 4, the last 4, and if I choose 6, the last 6, and all that jazz. I can then come in here, got my eye on the time, so I'm picking up speed to finish this, but I'm going to wrap a transpose function around it, so I can throw that into column headers, and now we're just going to fill in this middle bit. This is going back to a technique I've demoed once or twice already, so it should be pretty cool. And that is to use good old sum ifs to get the value, returning a number again for multiple conditions. It's probably the easiest way of doing it in my personal opinion. Sum range. That's an easy question because the sum range, I've only got one this time. Value column, data value. Getting awkward with zooming. Comma. The criterias are the more difficult questions. Now, it doesn't really matter what order you do it in, but if the first criteria is going to be the row labels, so cake, chocolate, coffee. Now remember, that is selected from that drop-down list in I3. They might choose product, they might choose category. I don't know what one they've chosen. So this takes us back to a previous example, because we did this in a previous example. I'm going to use indirect to build this up. I know that the table is called data, open square bracket, and then I'm going to concatenate onto that the reference of that drop down. Ampersand, let's close it off, finishing with a flourish. I hope you're enjoying this example. It is getting a bit intense, I know. Close off indirect. Okay, back to sum ifs. The criteria. Lots of zooming, I'm afraid, because of the size of this. This range here is going to put in that hashtag automatically for me, or that hash spill ref. Bit of DA stuff, dynamic array stuff. Next one is not so bad. Next criteria range is the periods. Select the table column, comma, and then I can select the periods over here. I'm picking up the speed somewhat. This is the finished formula at the moment. So grab the number where the table column is whatever they selected from the drop down, product or category, building it up like we did in examples earlier for what's in the row labels, and then whatever's in the period. And I've got the hash there for the dynamic spill refs. I could put these on different lines like before, but just keeping it all in one line here. If I zoom out for effect and press enter, it spills it all in. So it should not matter if somebody changes this to category. See, it's dynamically shrinking, so the DA effect. And if I change this to 6, or if I change it to 10, or even 20, actually 20 is probably a bit much, don't know where the columns are. But yeah, a fully dynamic kind of pivot table, if you will, cross-tab report, using formulas, using lookup functions, hence why I'm doing it in this presentation, which is about lookup functions. In that example, we've got rows, columns, index being used for a range, and indirect being used twice. So a lot of lookup functions getting involved to help, but I'm also using that new DA engine for the the dynamic bit, which is a bit fancy, and unfortunately is only on 365 at the moment. But the functions being used are not, and that's important to stress. Excellent. I hope that makes sense. Quite a few examples there. No VLOOKUP or index match or XLOOKUP. Looking at some of the more secret lookup functions and how they can be used. Open for Q&A.
We have a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask them one by one.
Okay.
So the first question is, what if there are two sales on the same date for the same product?
Okay. Yeah. If it's going back to the sum ifs function, then it would add them up. It wouldn't have worked correctly, unless that's what you wanted. So to achieve something like that, if you wanted both, I would have used a function called filter, which is another lookup function. It's only for 365 users, so it's quite new. And I didn't want to mention it today because of that reason, but that would solve it. The way I did it here today, it's only working on the unique, like one instance of the number.
Okay, so the second question is, can we use the choose function on a standalone basis if we introduce another variable like product or location?
Yeah, if I understand it correctly. However you get that index number in there, so choose will just work off that index number, whether somebody's typing that or whether something like a match function is returning it. That question might have been asked before I did the match example, maybe. And then the choose function will just pick it from a list, whether that's a list of values or a list of functions or a list of ranges. Yeah, as long as you can feed it a number, you've got to feed it a number, an index number, then you can go and get whatever you need.
Okay.
I hope that's it.
Yeah. So the next question is, how do you make the data validation list or the form controls dynamic if you add another location in the list?
Okay. A couple of ways, really, I guess. If you're using if you've got Microsoft 365, then we can use the dynamic arrays for that. So the drop-down list would point to a range area, and we can use a dynamic array, which is what I did for that period in the last example. That was dynamic if people added to it. And that was using new 365 functions, unique and sort, to drive that. If you don't have 365, we can generate that range in multiple other ways. We could use a table. So we can maybe use Power Query or something like that or a pivot table. You can maybe use Power Query or a pivot table to create a deduplicated list. So to kind of copy it and just take out the duplicates. Both of those could do that. But then to make it dynamic, the pivot table is already dynamic. And the Power Query would export it as a table. So that would also be dynamic. You'd have to click refresh, but I think that's it. Yeah, in newer versions, dynamic arrays. Outside 365, off the top of my head, I'd probably use either a pivot table or probably even better, I would use Power Query, I think.
Okay, so the next question is, what are the other formulas you can use for this example? That is the indirect sheet.
What one? Sorry, what indirect one? The
Indirect one sheet.
Oh, indirect one. Let me just remind me what's on that one. Okay, the one where it grabs the quarter one, quarter two, etc. sales. Or the easiest way. I mean, using indirect in that example because I'm grabbing the name of the table. And because I was using some ifs, and some ifs wants a range. It asks for the sum range. Then I need to provide it with a range. So indirect was the easiest way. If you want to use some ifs still, because you could use index or something like that, but if you want to keep with some ifs, instead of, well, I'd still need indirect, to be honest, because I'd have to give it a range. So there's not really another option there. If I wasn't using some ifs though, if I was using something else like VLOOKUP, let's call it, then VLOOKUP's going to ask for an index number. So now we've got a different ball game, and I can use a match function to find a column number instead. So instead of looking for the column called quarter 3, I would be looking for the 5th column. You guys can't see the screen at the moment, but if you can remember how it was written, like quarter 3, I could maybe use the right function to take the last digit of the 3 and then throw that into like a match to say like find that column number. Is that making sense? If you can picture that.
Alan, maybe you can share your screen.
Yeah. So hopefully I'm talking about the right sheets in my explanation here.
What about, can we use offset with sum? Offset.
Yeah, can do, yeah. Yes, because that's going to return a range as well. That can return a range. Yeah, we could do offset. You need to give it something to offset from. So once again, it's far easier to use indirect in this example. But yes, it can be done. Offset, for those who may not know so much, it's another function that's got the ability of returning a range. And if we've got some ifs and it's asking for the sum range, we could use offset to kind of to do that, to grab the right area. Yeah, it's another volatile function. So index is better than it. Yeah, it's possible. Sorry, hesitating a bit in my words because it's difficult to answer kind of properly because a lot of it depends on how the spreadsheet has been set up. And obviously this has been set up for the particular reason of talking about indirect. So there are other ways of solving it, and everything that's been mentioned are legitimate answers to the question. But those answers, probably the best answer would be that if you want to do it a different way, I'd probably change the setup of the data. Because although things are offset and that would work, the better solution would probably be to, change the way that the data is organized.
The last question is, what will be the use case scenarios for the last example? Will that be helpful in a dashboard?
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, absolutely. And then because it's formula driven, you can run your charts or your conditional formatting, your spark lines, other formulas. You can run all those off that. As you can pivot tables. I'm not putting pivot tables down, but because pivot tables lead you to a pivot chart, and then when you run formulas on them, the get pivot data runs, although we can avoid it, it does run by default. Then the fact that nowadays, especially with the new DA, we can get a formula like result gives us a little bit more flexibility. We can go and use the normal charts, and I can go and use formulas based on spiel references rather than pivot table references. Yeah, and then use that, in your dashboards, your models. Definitely, it's a dynamic report, really.
Okay, so these were all the questions. Thank you. That was indeed an insightful session. I'm sure the participants also enjoyed it as well. On behalf of Excel and Excel, I thank you for sharing your wisdom. I also thank the audience for participation and support.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's great to be here as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. There, just
Alan,
a note.
thank you, Alan. Alan, nice to have you on here. I did also learn something today.
Excellent.
As I said, I will be a student today.
Good. Everyone's a student. I'm always a student on stuff too.
Good.
Learning, aren't we?
Yes. For members, just want to share, Alan also runs London Excel Meetup, where he invites experts, Excel MVPs across globe. They try to share their knowledge, wisdom over there. So do also follow Alan on computergaga.com and also on London Excel Meetup. And I think Alan is coming up with some masterclasses shortly.
Yes.
Good. Yes. Can you share some information about your masterclass, which is coming up shortly?
Sure. I've got a masterclass on Excel formulas, which is quite appropriate. And it's on the 5th of August. And it's done online. There's only 10 seats available. I'm not sure how many are left. It's going quick. I do have a link for it, but I don't have it available at the moment. But if you go to... Sorry, go on.
Maybe you can share it. We can share it on the chat.
Sure. From it's all organised by a company called Detail Productions, who are a company who organised the Global Excel Summit in London in February 2021. I'm just quickly browsing to it now. That's why I'm looking to my right. They start next week. There's 8 sessions, I think. One of them is me. There are other speakers as well. Just send a link direct to mine. And it's all about Excel formulas. So not just lookup, all different formulas. Do you want me to put it into the YouTube directly, Deepak, or to you? Let me pop it in there. I've just put the link into the chat area of YouTube directly. Yeah, that's the masterclass I'll be delivering. So it's a full day training, proper training.
Thank you, Alan. Nice to have you. Nice to have you.
Thank you very much.
Nidhi, you can take it over. Nidhi?
Yes, sir. Just a note to the participants. Our next session is on time intelligence in Power BI Desktop by CAS Ratnagiri on 24 July 2020, that is tomorrow, 6 p.m. and followed by 31st July 2020 on Web Security by Dr. K. Paul Jayakar. Thank you so much for attending this session. Do not forget to like the video, and for more updates, please subscribe to our channel. To know more on EiEFreshTalk, use the link in the description box. We would be delighted to have your suggestions from your end. You can drop your suggestions in the comment section. Stay tuned for more Fresh Talks. Happy weekend. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Cheers. Thank you.